Hey family, I'm PT, Pastor Teray Roberts. I'm the lead pastor of the Potter's House at 1LA in Denver. And on behalf of my wife, Pastor Sarah, and myself, we want to welcome you to our channel and to this word. I cannot wait for you to hear what God has for you in this message. I want to tell you a few things really quickly. Subscribe. If you're not already subscribed to this channel, subscribe so that you can be made aware of all of the word that's coming at you week in and week out. And also turn on your notifications so you don't miss a morsel that comes forth. We're also grateful for you and your partnership. If you are so compelled, we invite you to support what we're doing, not just our church, but what our church is doing. There are a number of outreaches, a number of things, critical, necessary things that we support, and we're able to do it because of your generosity. So without further ado, let's get right into this word. God bless you. I'll see you soon.
I'm going to get into my word. I'll be speaking from the subject, the ground is shifting. The ground is shifting. Come on, somebody. Did you see that? It shifted right now. When you came up and got prayer, it shifted. When you walked into the room, it shifted. When you decided that I'm going to make my way, I don't care how many people are there, I don't care how much traffic I have to go through, the ground shifted. When you broke off that relationship, the ground shifted. You thought you were just doing what you were supposed to do, but you were shifting the ground so that breakthrough could happen. The ground is shifting. So I'm speaking out of Exodus 3, verse 4. And it says, "So when the Lord saw that he turned aside to look," this is Moses having an encounter with the angel of the Lord, and he is walking the sheep, and he turns and he sees a burning bush. And my text says, "So when the Lord saw that he turned aside to look, God called to him from the midst of the bush and said, 'Moses, Moses,' and he said, 'Here I am.' Then he said, 'Do not draw near this place. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place where you stand is holy ground.' Moreover, he said, 'I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob.' And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. And the Lord said, 'I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. So I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up from that land to a good and large land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites. Now therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with the Egyptians, which the Egyptians oppressed them. Come now, therefore, and I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt.' But Moses said to God, 'Who am I? Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, and that I should bring the children of Israel out of Egypt?' So he said, 'I will certainly be with you. And this shall be a sign to you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain, the same mountain where you felt unqualified, the same mountain where I interrupted your rhythm and gave you a word from God. It is on this mountain that I am going to prove my word to you.' Spirit of the living God, invade this place. If you don't do it, God, it cannot be done. But if you do it, strongholds could come down and chains could be broken. If you do it, you could change Hollywood to holy ground. You could change La Brea to holy ground. You could change Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard to holy ground. That's the kind of God that we serve, because when you step into a room, it automatically becomes holy. So God, I am giving you full reign. Let there be nothing off limits, that you may move in this place and send a word that changes the lives of your people. So God, I ask that you would give me wisdom, that you would give me clarity, that I would have no nerves, no fear, no anxiety, that you would just do that thing that you do when you sit in a room so that lives can be changed for the glory of God. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. So, one of my favorite things to do from time to time when it's like partly cloudy outside is to stand still in one spot and look up. And when you look up, when it's partly cloudy, you can see that it looks like the sky is moving, but those of us who understand geology recognize that it's not actually the sky that is moving, it's the earth that is moving. It is the ground that is moving. But yet the only time we realize that the ground is moving is when we look up, because our lives are in rhythm and in motion in such a way that we don't always realize that the ground underneath us is shifting. And yet this is a part of life. Everything is constantly moving. I remember playing a game as a kid. We'd play freeze. And if you could be completely still like a statue, you would win the prize. And the truth is, we were all lying, because we were all moving even though we were trying to be still, because it is just the natural way that our bodies function, that we're always moving. Our muscles are always moving. Our eyes are twitching. Everything is always in circulation. And so we have a responsibility as we navigate this earth, not just physically, but to recognize spiritually when things are shifting. To recognize in business when things are shifting. There are people who study finance every single day, and one small change in the stock market represents a major shift that is taking place, because we recognize that everything is connected to something. And so as I was studying and asking God, what is it that you would like for me to say tonight? Because Lord knows if you don't give me anything to say, we're going to sit up here and look at each other. So I asked God, what is it that you want me to say? And he told me that the ground is shifting again. That, that the area that we have become familiar walking in is shifting. And that everything is going to look the same, but it's really not the same, because the ground has shifted. And I think it's important that we know that, because there's a certain perspective that we have when we recognize that the ground is shifting. I mean, like the tables are turning. I mean, like our mindsets are shifting. I'll try to break this down for you. Have you ever realized that the ground has shifted like after the fact? It's like when you're talking to someone who you used to be friends with, so close to, and they haven't changed. But for some reason, you're not able to connect the way that you used to, because you're standing in something different now. The ground has shifted. I'm just standing in something differently. The same music doesn't move me anymore. I don't get excited about certain things anymore, because the ground has shifted. I'm standing in something different. It takes a little bit more to move me than it did before. I'm not the same person that I used to be. It's not you, it's me. The ground has shifted underneath me. I just gave somebody the words they've been looking for to cut some things off. I could tell that something was different. I just didn't know how to express it. The ground has shifted. My priorities have changed. My dreams have changed. My attention is focused on something different. It's not you, it's me. It's just the ground is shifted. I'm trying to build something that cannot be shaken when everything else is being shaken. And it takes a certain level of dedication and commitment in order for me to do that. It's not you, it's me. The ground has just shifted from underneath me. I'm counting my money differently. I'm dreaming my dream differently. It's not you, it's me. We used to vibe when I was standing on a certain ground, but now that the ground has shifted underneath me, what makes the ground shift? A word makes the ground shift. When I receive a word that penetrates past my insecurities and past my fears, it shifts the ground that I'm standing on. The ground could shift right here in this room, and you'll walk out of this place a totally different person, and everything will be the same. Same cars, same shoes, same life, but a different me because the ground has shifted. I see opportunity where I once saw lack. I see open doors where I once saw closed doors. I see God making a way out of no way. So sometimes I need to pray that God, you would do nothing but just shift the ground around me, that it would go from being that which I am familiar with to holy ground. I need to shift this ground into holy ground. And this part in our text is so interesting to me because we've got Moses, who was literally about to go from standing in what is familiar to him into holy ground. I really think Moses is one of the most interesting characters in the Bible. He was born in a time where all of the Hebrew males were supposed to have been thrown into the river. What I love about that is that he was thrown into the river, but the ground shifted a little bit differently when he was thrown into the river, because he had someone who had enough foresight to build a raft. I'm going to still throw you in the river, but I'm going to do it with a hedge of protection around you so that it looks like I put you in danger, but in reality, I taught you how to navigate danger. And so he's found, though, by an Egyptian. So you guys know the story. Y'all saw The Prince of Egypt 20 years ago, like I did. I mean, you read your word every single day. I got confused. But we've got this Hebrew baby who was thrown into a basket in the river, and then he's picked up by the very people, the very group that was looking to persecute him. And I really love Moses' story because time after time we see him being a stranger in familiar territory. And so if I may just set up this text to give you context about where he is, I want to share that at this time he has been living in Midian for about 40 years. Why did he move to Midian from Egypt? I'm glad you asked. Well, because one day, and this is where my Ebonics version of the Bible comes together, because it's going to be a little raggedy, but I'm going to get us there, all right? Okay, so our boy Moses was born a Hebrew, right? But he grew up in Pharaoh's household, but he knew he was Hebrew. Well, one day he's walking around Egypt and he sees that two Hebrews are having an argument. They beefing, all right? That's what was happening, okay? And so when he sees that these two Hebrews are having an argument, he tries to interject like, hey, yo, what's up? Like, let's all get along. Like, I'm one of you, you're one of me, and like, we supposed to be doing better than this. And they was like, oh, so now you want to be one of us. Let me back up on off of you before you kill me like you killed the Egyptian last week. And Moses was like, what? Y'all heard about that? Was it on the Shade Room? It's phonics. Stick with me, I'm going to bless you. Okay, and so when he realizes that it is not a secret anymore that he killed this Egyptian, and he killed this Egyptian because he saw the Egyptian beating on a Hebrew. Now, this is very interesting because there was something about him witnessing the Egyptian beating on the Hebrew that brought up anger down on the inside of him. And we have these moments in our life where we cannot fully be Hebrew and we cannot fully be Egyptian. And when we try to pick a side, we don't really know what side we're on until life thrusts us into something. I gotta break that down because it is this juxtaposition of him being Hebrew and Egyptian that he hasn't quite dealt with that ends up sending him fleeing out of the place where he was raised. And it is also the juxtaposition of him being Hebrew and Egyptian that God uses to call him back to the place where he once fled. Because all of us are not entirely one thing. And we don't know exactly which one we are until we're placed in a situation where the greatest version of us has to rise up and handle it. And depending on which version rises up, that determines what God has to deal with down on the inside of us. I'm gonna work this thing on out with y'all. So Moses flees because he is conflicted within. Because sometimes it is easier to run from a situation than it is to figure out why we are conflicted. And it would be so easy to penalize him from running away from that situation. But the reality is that we cannot always figure out who we are authentically in the environments that produced us. So you think you came here for a gig, or you think you went somewhere to go off to school, when in reality, God sent you there so that you can figure out who you are in your core. I thought, I'll share my own testimony. I thought that I was coming to Los Angeles because I fell in love with an incredible man and his beautiful children. And I did. But I also came to Los Angeles because I was going to sit under this ministry. And this ministry was going to awaken a gift that was down on the inside of me. You have to understand that I haven't even been preaching for 5 years. But God put me in this ministry. And when I started really feeding and digesting what I was receiving from this ministry, I grew and developed in such a way that I could be a teacher and a student at the same time. You see, because God will accelerate what he places down on the inside of you. So I think we should just celebrate one more time that 18 years ago on this day, that God answered a call from a man named Teray Roberts, and that it birthed greatness down on the inside of us. Because every time hell gets nervous when people come into this building, and it started 18 years ago because one man said yes. And if I could just preach his life real quick, I wonder what you were setting up today that 18 years later from now will have an inheritance that eyes haven't seen and ears haven't heard. Just real quick, this ain't even in my notes. But Pastor Teray birthed a ministry before millennials were even in church and leaving the church. But God started him 18 years before the millennials would leave the church so that he could stand guard as they were leaving to say, wait a minute, I got a way to translate God in a way that you can understand. I got a way that you can know God without politics and without scandals and all of these other things. I found a way. I wonder what God is doing in you right now that the world hasn't even taken notice of. I hear God saying the ground is shifting, baby. That you don't even see it yet. But you'll look back 18 years from now and thought, wow, I thought I was just getting it for myself, but I was getting it for people who were connected to me. If you've never been to Activate LA, we make room for God to do whatever he's going to do on a Thursday night. And sometimes we let him just sit in the room for a little bit so that he can chase out fears and chase out insecurities and chase out second guessing, because the ground is going to shift whether you move or don't move. But if you would dare to move with the cadence of what God is doing in the earth, then you can partner with him and get ahead of the curve and get ahead of the breakdown and get ahead of the recession. And when everyone else is afraid, I am confident because I recognize that the ground had to shift to make room for me to take my place. You see, my lane couldn't be created unless the ground started shifting. God created a cry in Egypt that were coming out of the people in the Hebrew people at the same time that Moses was somewhere minding his business. I got to say that the way I studied it, God produced the cry before he produced the solution. Which means that when we see the headlines, all we see is a cry. But what God is doing is producing the cry so that when the ground begins to shift, that there will be a solution already being raised up. So the more that the earth starts crying, the more that God's people starts getting in position, because we recognize that when the earth is crying out for the glory of God, that it's really crying out for his sons and daughters to take their position. And I came here on a Thursday night. I only need 10 minutes with you to say what God has already told me. And I hear God saying it's time for you to take your position. It's time for you to stop pretending like you don't got what you got. Because when you know what you got and you know who gave it to you, you can walk down to the very place where you fled and say that I am sent me. I am that I am has a word, and that word is that strongholds are coming down. That word is that generational curses are broken. That word is that the criminal justice system has got to get its life together. The industry's got to have integrity. The abuse of power will not be tolerated. Because the ground is shifting. And it's shifting in our direction. And it's going to take us recognizing that we're standing in a holy moment. And you won't even realize that it is a holy moment if we're so busy taking in social media and headlines that we'll just scroll our finger at the government shutdown and think, oh Lord, what is this world coming to? Not recognizing that the ground is shifting. This is a holy moment. And God is looking to raise up some people who don't mind answering the hard calls. The kind of calls that means you have to go into places where you once fled and looked foolish, and you have to go back to reintroduce yourself, armed and equipped with the knowledge of who God has called you to be. The ground is shifting, the ground is shifting, and I hear God saying it's holy ground. And what keeps so many of us from recognizing the power of the holy ground we've been standing on, I feel this prophetically for somebody. You've been standing on holy ground. The only problem is you haven't yet taken your shoes off. You see, God told Moses, you have to take your shoes off. You have to take off every piece of dust and dirt that brought you into this moment. It was symbolic that when you step into a holy moment, you can't step into it the way you've stepped to everything else. So I gotta be willing to take my shoes off. What does that mean? That means that there are experiences that have made you believe that if I step into this, I may lose like I lost last time. If I step into this, I may be made fun of like I was before. I can't step into this the way that God is calling me to because it risks too much vulnerability. It risks me being my authentic self. You see, Moses had found a way to live authentically in Midian. He wasn't worried about whether he was Hebrew or Egyptian. He could just be himself. But the true test of authenticity is not what you can do when you are isolated. The true test of authenticity is, will you still be authentic when you have to go and present yourself to where you used to be? So do we only worship and live for God when we're in this environment, but then when we leave, we're someone else? Who are you really? If the ground is shifting, then you have to recognize that you can shift the ground, but you cannot shift the ground if you are pretending to be someone you are not. You can only shift the ground when you do it armed and equipped with the knowledge of who God has called you to be, because it's going to take the same power that allowed a bush to burn and not be consumed for you to go into that boardroom, for you to go into that relationship, for you to go into that business and maintain who you are. So the ground had to shift. Moses had to go from walking in a familiar land into holy ground, because God was ultimately going to ask Moses to go somewhere and shift the ground there. And I love this because the burning bush got his attention. But it is when the burning bush started calling his name that he had to turn and look. And he had to engage with what would have been considered dangerous, but because it was calling his name, that was his fire. There is a fire burning, and it is calling your name. And it has been calling your name for a very long time. It says, write the music. It says, take the job. It says, you can do that. Make the move. It says that you can do it. Get the help that you need. There's this burning bush that has been calling your name for so long. And until you respond and begin to engage with that, I mean, it's been burning for years. I don't know who that is. This isn't just no new fire. This bush has been burning down on the inside of you since you were a little boy. And it's been telling you that you can do it. And it's been telling you that God is going to send you. But you have not yet turned and looked at that burning bush. And Moses simply said, here I am. I hear you calling me. I hear you asking about me. I hear you telling me that I'm supposed to step into this thing. But so many of us are like Moses, and we're afraid. And we say, who am I that you would send me to Pharaoh? Who am I that you would send me to deliver these people? Who am I that you would send me into this city? Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? And God never answers the question. He just says that I'm going to be with you. Because it was never about who you were. It was about who God is. And as long as you make this thing about you, you'll have countless questions about why you can't do it. I feel the glory of God in this place. I feel like what shifts the ground is when we recognize that we got to look up and not down. I've been making this thing about me. I've been making this thing about my relationships. I've been trying to figure out how I can calculate this miracle, how I can formulate this movie, how I'm going to be able to put it together with what I've been working with. And I hear God saying, this thing was never about you. I want to break the spirit of you out of this room. I feel it like it's heavy in this thing. Like you get in your own head and start talking yourself out of the very thing that God called you to do. And I want to break the spirit of you out of this room, the spirit of what you say you can do, the spirit of what you think is possible. I want to break the limits off of what God can do in your life. I want you to remove some of the barriers off of what God says you can do. Yes, you. I've been talking to you with the drug addiction. I've been talking to you with the broken home. I've been talking to you from foster care. I've been talking to you over and over and over again. I know who you are. I know where you've come from. I know what you had and what you didn't have, and I still chose you. Nobody can do this thing like you. Nobody can bring deliverance like you. Nobody can bring my glory to those people like you. And I'm waiting for somebody to recognize that the ground is shifting. And I'm waiting for somebody who doesn't mind taking off their shoes and stepping into the next dimension of who they're called to be. I'm just trying to see who God put in this room.
Bless you, God. Bless your name, Jesus.
Just no more running. No more coaching your fears on how to talk to you. No more giving someone else the power to stop you. No more longing for distractions. It's time to step into holy ground. It's time to step into another level of surrender. It's time to actually activate what God has placed down on the inside of you. And God doesn't tell Moses that, hey, listen, if you're going to do this, you got to have faith. I wondered time after time again. I said, God, like, Abraham was the father of faith, and David had so much courage, and you used this guy, Moses, who didn't even want to be used, who didn't even think that it was possible. Why did you use him? And I feel like part of the reason why God chose Moses is because Moses didn't mind bringing his fears along for the journey. That Moses didn't think that he had to have it together in a certain way before he could step into it. But he said, I don't feel qualified and I don't know why you're going to choose me, but God, I'm going to go anyway. And the more that he walked, the more room he gave God to show up. And the whole people of the Hebrews, the children of Israel were placed on his shoulders. The shoulders of someone who didn't feel like they had it all together, but they knew without a shadow of a doubt that they had a word from God. I want to offer us an opportunity to recognize and receive that the ground has shifted in our life. I feel the presence of God in this place. I want to dare you to see your life with a new level of consecration. To take what you do each and every day so seriously that you have no choice but to take off your shoes and say, God, I cannot afford to walk into this day carrying the residue of yesterday. But God, if you would create in me a clean heart, that if you would purify my hands, if you would allow me to become what you had in mind as I step into this day, I will recognize that every situation, every opportunity, every relationship is holy ground, and it is holy ground because you are with me. And if you are with me, anywhere we step is holy. Anything we connect with has got to be holy, and that takes intentionality. To say, I'm not just in Hollywood, I'm not just in Minnesota, I'm not just in Atlanta, I am standing on holy ground. This is not the kind of decision that my bank account can tell me what I can do. This is not the kind of decision that a job can tell me whether or not I can handle. This is the type of situation that only holy ground can dictate. And I'm trying to build a life on holy ground. And if you know that one of the only things that has kept you from really stepping into holy ground are the experiences of yesterday that you carry with you into each new opportunity until you literally self-sabotage a blessing that God wanted to give you freely. Door after door after door. They don't just close in my face. I just do something that I know I shouldn't have done, but because I didn't see myself worthy and because I didn't see myself able to finish, I decided to back out before I could mess it up. But because I'm stepping into holy ground, I recognize that this is going to stretch me, and this is going to stretch my faith, and this is going to stretch my identity, and this is going to stretch everything I ever thought I knew about myself. But I'm really ready to be stretched because staying the same size has not been working for me. And if there is anybody in this room who has decided that it's time for me to answer to this stretching season, I want to give you 10 seconds to send up a praise to God so that he knows that someone has just made their heart holy ground. I've just made my mind holy ground. I've just made that job holy ground. I gotta forgive, I gotta release, I gotta let go, because I'm making room for holy ground. I used to have all kinds of ground, but now I only have room for holy ground. There's a battle I gotta fight.